What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So I had a topic today I want to discuss. I know a lot of people have trouble with this. I've seen several people having problems with this, and they can't get their axle seal to stop leaking. They've taken it back apart, they put a new seal in, the seal wasn't damaged during installation, and they can't figure out why that the axle seal is still leaking gear oil out the back of it. Most of your axles, whether it be on an 18-wheeler, truck, trailer, or on like a tandem dual gooseneck 10,000 pound rated axles, are oil bath axles, and most of them have 90 weight gear oil in there for bearing lube, and there's a seal in the back, and that seal will leak when it goes bad and leak the oil out of it onto your brakes, and then you have no trailer brakes, or if it's on the back of your 18-wheeler, you have no truck brakes if it's drum brakes, because it fills the drum up with hub oil, gear oil, whatever, and you no longer have any brakes. So I'm going to show you on this board here, try to draw a picture of what I found is a solution, and I don't have any issues most of the time with hub oil seal leaking. I don't think I've changed but one in like 5-6 years, something like that. So I don't have too much problem with it, and I'm going to share with you what I discovered, what works for me. The manufacturer says something a little different than what I've discovered, but I'm just telling you what works for me. So this is going to be kind of a side view of your, let's see if I can draw this here, of your hub. This will be like a trailer hub. This is going to be your wheel studs out here. This will be a wheel stud where your lug nuts go. This is going to be your cap. When you remove this cap right here, I'm just going to draw the cap way out here. When you remove this cap from the hub, this is where you put your hub oil in right here. Say it's on a trailer application. You got your little field plug here. You pop out the center, and you put oil in here with your little oil bottle here like this. So you follow me? This is your hub. This is your studs. When you pull this cap off, you will see a nut right here. I'm trying to think how you draw a nut. We'll do it something like this here. It's going to be your nut, and this has places for a socket to grab it, like a normal nut does. Behind this nut, you're going to have a washer type thing with ears on it that can be bent over to keep this outer nut from turning. And there's a few different way these are done, but basically behind that, most of the time, you have another nut that's going to be very similar to the first nut, and then behind that you'll have just a washer with a little tang on the inside. So those of you who've done this, are familiar with it, whatnot, will follow along pretty easily. If you've never seen this, then you may have a little trouble understanding. But basically, when your hub goes on there, you'll have a flat washer like this, and a lot of times it'll have a little tang on the inside. Then you'll have a nut that goes over the top of this that you'll tighten this down. This sets your clearance, and then you will have another washer that goes on top of this, and it's got little ears on it like this that'll grab the next nut you put on. And then on top of that, you'll have a nut here. I don't know really how to draw a nut. Just follow me along. You put that nut on there, you take a screwdriver, and you bend these tabs over, and it keeps this outer nut from backing off. This first nut here, after you put your washer on, is what sets your bearing preload, or your bearing tension, or your end plate, as they like to call it on axles. That's the way the manufacturers like to run these axles, is with end plate. And I think from the factory, most of them are set up, they put a gauge, a dial indicator. I'm just going to draw a picture here so you'll understand. They draw they put a dial indicator on your hub right here. So this would just go, and it don't actually go on the stud usually, it goes in between the studs. Just follow me. You got a dial indicator, comes up here, got a gauge on it right here, reads thousandths. It goes in here, and you tighten this nut right here, this inner nut down, until that hub has like 1 to 4 thousandths in clearance on this. So there's zero preload on the bearing. So that's how you set that. Well, when that bearing gets wear or wore in, this clearance gets more, okay? And usually the hub right here, the end, will start to wobble. You got dual tires on this, remember? As you go over dips in the road, this thing is able to wobble back and forth. That causes the seal back here, it's in the back side of here, that causes this seal that goes onto your axle right here to leak, because it's allowing this to twist this way. And so the most common thing that I've seen from the leaking axle seal, if the seal was not damaged when it's installed, is because the end clearance on this axle is too much. If you have too much end clearance in this, in other words, this nut is not tight enough, it's not compressing those two cone bearings inside this hub end tight enough to hold this hub to where it runs true. It's wobbling back and forth like this. That'll make your axle seal here leak oil out of it and get on your brakes, if you follow what I'm saying. So what I do is I like to tighten this inner nut here up and run it with some preload. You need to have your brake drum and everything off here to feel this, but I like to tighten that nut up so that I can spin it. I don't want the hub just to spin around and keep spinning. I want it to spin like, you know, grab the stud with no brake drum and no nothing on it, just snugging the inner nut up and spin it. You know, I want it to spin like maybe 2 to 3 times, so that you don't want to just sit there and spin for like 15 or 20 seconds. That's way too loose. That's what's causing, most of the time, your oil seal to start leaking, or to continue to leak even if you put a new one in there, is when you get that weight on there and then the bearing gets a little wear in it and whatnot, gets seated in, your races get seated in, the hub's moving going down the road. But you want a little bit of preload on that. The reason that I think the main reason that the axle manufacturers recommend end play in this is for fuel economy. And that running the end play instead of a preload, you know, you're leaving that axle to spin as free as possible. Well, that's fine and dandy as far as fuel mileage, but I've never noticed any fuel mileage difference between running it with a little bit of end play and a little bit of preload versus I have noticed that when you run it with end play, the axle seal is a lot more likely to leak than it is running it with preload. That's what I've discovered. Obviously, you don't want it too tight. I mean, you can't just crank down on it. You know, you'll get it too tight or it won't hardly turn. You'll run into some problems on, you know, the axle end possibly overheating and could lock up or something if you get carried away. So you don't want to do that either. But, you know, I'm just trying to tell you what I've had success with, and that's the way I do it. I like to be a little bit of preload on there. If you've ever set up a ring and pinion on a differential, when you set your pinion gear up or when you set your carrier up, you always have to have preload on those cone bearings in order to hold that stuff in there, or it will move. Your carrier will move side to side. It will try to separate from your pinion gear, and you know, bad things will happen. So those are always run in preload. So it does not hurt to run bearings in preload. When you set up a pinion gear with a crush sleeve, there's a certain amount of preload, and there's a spec on that. Usually, just off of memory, 10 to 15 inch-pounds or something rotating preload on a pinion. And so kind of a similar idea here. Anytime you have an oil seal and you set it up, if the oil seal can move around on the shaft, if the shaft moves around inside the oil seal, it's probably going to leak. You can replace all the seals you want to. If you hadn't stopped it from moving around by, in this case, snugging your bearings up a little bit more, or in some cases you'll have a bushing or something, depending on your application, that there's the shaft going in. If the bushings wore out, you can put all the new seals in you want to. The shaft still moves around inside of it, it's still going to leak oil. So this is the solution to your issue. If you've put a new oil seal in because it was leaking. You put it in there, it still leaks. You pulled it back apart. You put another seal in there. You put it back together. You're convinced that you did everything right. You did not damage the seal in any way, and it still leaks. This is probably your problem right here. You're probably not getting your hub assembly tight enough, and it's probably allowing it to wobble as it rotates, and this seal will always leak if that is the case. That's what I found is, you know, tighten it up a little bit, run it with a little bit of preload on it, and I do not have very many problems with axle seals leaking. So hope this helps somebody else. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys in the next video.